Hi everybody, my name is Sandra Nardoni and I am here to give you an introduction to the topic of homeopathy. And what I would like to do right now as a little introduction before I get started is for you to just put your brain in a mindset of open-mindedness, because there are a few things that might keep you from really understanding. One of them is to have preconceived notions about what homeopathy is. Some of you actually may know what homeopathy is, but many of you, like me, will think you know what homeopathy is, and you really don't. This is an introduction. It gives you a lot of history. History is so important to building a foundational knowledge of any topic. And so a lot of this is about the history of homeopathy, how it came into being, so that you can understand what it is. And I really need you to keep an open mind about this, because if you don't really understand what homeopathy is, you could very well dismiss something that could be a huge factor to healing in your life. I know that each one of you has at the very least, a goal, but quite possibly a mission that God has you on for your business and your life. And I want you to be able to live your life out to the fullest of your potential. But we can't do that when we are sick or tired or depressed. Maybe you have a family member or a friend that's very dear to you, that's a huge part of your life, that's suffering from something that no one can seem to solve in the medical world. I'm here to tell you that with a little bit of work and research, you probably can solve that issue, or at least lessen it greatly with homeopathy. And I want you to be able to do that. And the only way you can do that is if you stay really open-minded. Now, even if you don't have a lot of time to learn about homeopathy after this presentation, hopefully you'll walk away from this knowing enough to find help from a homeopathic practitioner, or to join a study group or something like that. So those are kind of the goals that I have going into this, because I want you to be able to reach your full potential in your mission and your life. And homeopathy, I believe, can be a big part of that. Even if you already are using supplements or oils or any of those other things, which I also use and find important in my life. So let's get started. Let's get started learning about this amazing topic and set you on a journey to actually solve some of the things that you or your family members or friends or close loved ones might be dealing with right now in your life that you haven't quite been able to solve through other means. I can't wait to get started on this presentation with you, and I'll see you on the other side.
Homeopathy, what you thought you knew, and the actual truth. Today, I'm going to give you an introduction to homeopathy because it is a powerful and natural way to stay healthy so you can live out your purpose and vision. Now, it won't keep you from getting sick. This is a way to treat illnesses or approach illnesses that's an alternative when you actually do get sick. And I'll explain more of that later. Here's a disclaimer though. I'm not a doctor, and the relationship between us is purely of student and teacher or consultant and client. Medical questions should be directed to a trusted medical professional. If you have any questions about anything, that's what you should do. Go talk to your doctor. So let's dive right into this content since I know we are on a time crunch. What homeopathy is not. That is very important to know because um, most people have misconceptions about it. So, homeopathy is not vitamins, supplements, holistic medicine, herbalism, essential oils, new age medicine, naturopathy, or home remedies. None of those things have anything to do with homeopathic medicines or approaches. I absolutely love supplementation. I use supplementation in my own life. And when I do it well and I'm consistent with it, that is what I use to prevent illness. Some of you may be able to hear today in my voice that I have had some congestion, and that has been happening this week. But I believe that I have shortened my illness using homeopathy. And I definitely have felt better using homeopathy instead of using over the counter drugs. So, homeopathy is actually a system of medicine. It's not something that you use prophylactically. It's not vitamins. It's not even naturopathic medicine. Naturopaths do use homeopathy in their practices often, but that is not the definition of homeopathy. So I just want to get that out of the way. A lot of you are into essential oils and supplementation and all that kind of stuff. That is great. And you can use that stuff right alongside homeopathic remedies. So, what is homeopathy? Homeopathy is a system of medicine. It's based on the concept that like cures like. And I'll get into that here in a minute, based on the law of the minimum dose. So there's no side effects and there's no interactions with medicines that you might be taking that are over the counter. So if you are taking an anxiety medication or a blood pressure medication or a thyroid medication or anything like that, you're not going to have interactions between that drug and the homeopathic remedy. Now, the homeopathic remedy might start to solve the issue that allopathic medicines have never been able to solve, making it necessary for you to work alongside your doctor to reduce the dosages that you're getting for the drug, but it is not going to interact with it. Everything comes with its risks, but so far, no one has experienced death by homeopathic medicines, which of course you can't say for allopathic medicines. They come largely from natural substances and they are made and manufactured by homeopathic pharmacies and regulated by the FDA. Natural medicines that actually work with your body, which is one of my favorite things about homeopathic medicines. So there are two different philosophies in the medical world that kind of they vie for authority and dominion in our world today. There is the rationalist philosophy where allopathic medicine comes from. These medicines are largely synthetic. They often have negative and even life altering or threatening side effects. And they use extreme approaches to chronic illnesses such as chemotherapy. Allopathic medicines are nearly always suppressing your immune system, leaving the body vulnerable later and driving illness deeper into the organs. Out of the empiricist philosophy grew the homeopathic approach. Now, there are more approaches than just the homeopathic approach that came from the empiricist philosophy, but it takes into consideration the whole person and it uses medicines that are largely found in nature. These medicines are gentle but very effective, and they work with the body to stimulate the immune response rather than taking over the immune system or suppressing it. And those are the two different philosophies that we see. So, when you look at allopathic medications and the typical pharmaceutical drug world at this point in time, and really dating back all the way back to the 1800s, um, allopathic medicines have caused a lot of death and destruction. It's interesting to me how committed we are to allopathic medicines in the Western world due to the overwhelming evidence that they really do a lot of harm. It's not that they do no good, but they do a lot of harm. And a lot of the good that they do has an undertone of some side effects that people don't actually realize are happening. Our world is not actually getting, the Western world is not getting less sick. We're actually getting more sick. And I actually read a study just the other day that said for the last 2 years in a row, we have diminished the average lifespan of the American by 1 full year. That's the first time that's happened in a very, very long time. Certainly since we have increased our ability to manage nutrition and all that kind of stuff. So we are not getting better, we're getting sicker. So, according to a paper authored by Donald Light, a professor of comparative health policy at Rowan University School of Osteopathic Medicine, that's a mouthful, isn't it? In Stratford, New Jersey, about 2,460 people per week are estimated to die from drugs that were properly prescribed and taken. And that's based on a detailed chart reviews of hospitalized patients. That is an amazing number of people. And that's just from hospitalized patients. That's not from people who die and no one knows what happened to them and there's no apparent reason for their death. Um, that is not from anything that is outside of a hospital environment. So imagine how many people are actually dying per week from prescribed medications that they take as they are directed. In contrast, and in light of thousands of documented cases where homeopathic medicines have proved wildly effective, there has never been even one reported death due to the proper use of a homeopathic medicine. That is absolutely amazing. Um, I think that that's a huge reason to look into this way of doing things. It's a more polite medicine discovered by a determined doctor. So, out of the empirist philosophy came the founder of homeopathy, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann. Hahnemann believed that the human body was and disease were actually of a spiritual nature, and that a good creator would not have allowed disease without leaving us some way in nature to deal with it. It was this idea that drove Dr. Hahnemann. He also believed, unlike the rationalists, that you don't have to understand disease to cure it. He thought that not everything would be able to be seen and analyzed, but he knew we could see and analyze the way the human body reacted to things in nature that may be therapeutic. And he thought medicine should heal and never be a danger to the patient. But when he was actually practicing medicine, the things that were happening during the world during that time, in the medical world, were quite appalling to us today. They were doing lobotomies. They were also bloodletting, which means they let 4/5 of the blood out of the human body to try to get rid of the disease, and then they expected that person to still live and recover. And of course, if they were a more healthy person, they might live and recover. But for the most part, people died from these procedures, and they continue to do them. In fact, many people believe that George Washington died from this practice. He caught a cold, and it got pretty bad and went into his lungs, and they used this procedure on him. And many people think he probably would have recovered from the cold if they hadn't done this, but they did, and he passed away. And no one really knows if it was the cold in his chest or the bloodletting, but a lot of people think it was the bloodletting. And that was the kind of stuff they were doing during the time that Hahnemann was a doctor. This is a quote from him in a letter to Dr. Huffland, who was an esteemed physician and friend. He was not a homeopath, though. He just respected the research that Hahnemann was doing. And he was the editor of a medical journal, and he allowed Dr. Hahnemann to publish the results of his experiments and his theories in his medical journal. So he wrote this in a letter. He said, "Would he, the father of all," obviously speaking of God, "coldly survey the torments of disease of his dearest creatures? Would he leave open no way to the genius of mankind, no easy, certain, and dependable way of regarding disease from the right angle, of determining the use and the specific, safe, and dependable results obtainable from these medicines?" That is a quote from him. So he was very aware of the fact that the medicines that were being used at the time were not dependable, and they were causing harm to the patients. And actually, that is why he didn't practice medicine for a period of time. So, who was this guy? Who was Dr. Hahnemann, and why do we care about what he did? He was born in Germany in 1755. He was a contemporary of Mozart and Beethoven. He actually, one of his proteges actually treated Beethoven, and Beethoven dedicated a couple of his concertos to his homeopathic doctor because no one else had been able to help him with an issue he was having, and he was on his deathbed. And this homeopathic doctor came in and served him with homeopathic remedies, and he recovered in just a few days. And he dedicated a couple of his most famous concertos to this doctor. So he lived through the American and French revolutions. He actually experienced the French Revolution himself. He was not a fan of Napoleon. He was very irritated with what was going on in the world with the French Revolution, not because of the concept of the French Revolution necessarily, but because of the actual war that happened and then what Napoleon did afterwards. He was very irritated. Of course, Napoleon didn't keep his word, and he then terrorized the world instead of freeing the world like he had promised in the beginning. His father was a poor potter, and he couldn't afford school for his young son. But Samuel was so brilliant that the school begged to have him and didn't charge him to attend. And actually, this happened multiple times throughout his life. He actually got scholarships to medical school as well for the same reason. He was just a brilliant, brilliant student. He actually taught Greek to the other students at the age of 12. He was fluent in 7 languages before the age of 24. So after earning his medical degree, he quit practicing medicine because he had a crisis of conscience. He couldn't deal with the way that medicines were not being tested at all before being given to patients. He believed that the medicines themselves were actually killing the patients and also the practices of the day. And so he didn't practice medicine again until he discovered homeopathic approaches because he understood that the common practices were so harmful. And even today, Hahnemann's ideas are misunderstood. His detractors say that he was unscientific, and because of his faith in God, that his approaches were purely spiritual. And this is patently false. If you read articles that are against homeopathy online, a lot of them will take this route. They also say that homeopathy can't really work because of the law of the minimum dose, because they're so um, you know, especially up until we had nanoparticles that were able to be seen under a microscope. Um, there were no molecules that you could see under a microscope of the original substance in homeopathic medicine. So people said that they were a placebo. But of course, you can use these, and I've done this myself. You can use these on animals and children that have no preconceived notions and don't even know what a placebo is. And you can watch them get better very, it's quite obvious. So the placebo effect argument is not a good one. And in addition to that, now we know we can see the nanoparticles under these very powerful microscopes, and we do see that the original substance still does live on, especially the imprint of the original substance in the medicines. And so we do know that they do exist in the medicines, and that is obviously what is helping with you know, with them actually working the way they ought to. So I love looking at the history of things, and I hope that this is helping you as well. Um, in addition to being false about the placebo stuff and then it's all spiritual, um, Dr. Hahnemann actually experimented on live healthy volunteers for 6 years before he even announced his concept of like cures like. He simply believed that people were spiritual beings who needed to be looked at as individuals rather than as a big group of people with the same illness. And so that is what got him in trouble. That and that his medicines were really working, and there were a lot of allopathic doctors at the time that were quitting the allopathic medical world and coming over to the homeopathic world. So, how did Hahnemann discover homeopathy? He was actually translating medical articles and essays and books as income. He had like 11 children or something like that. It was a lot of kids, and he needed to feed them. So he was translating articles and essays about chemistry and also about medicine. He was very proficient in both areas, so that they could be passed on, in other languages. And one day he was translating a book or an essay by a doctor that was talking about the treatment of malaria. And this doctor said that he believed that the Peruvian bark that he gave his patients worked because of its bitter properties. And Dr. Hahnemann was like, no, that's not, no. It was a common idea during that time that the like a substance worked because of things that were very general, like that, like their color or their bitter property or whatever. And Dr. Hahnemann just simply didn't believe that that was true. He rightly supposed that that was just an opinion that someone had come up with. So he made a tea out of Peruvian bark, and he started sipping it just to see what would happen. And within just a day or two of sipping that Peruvian bark, he got the symptoms of malaria, even though he didn't have them. He didn't have malaria. So that was like a total, that was a total aha, eureka moment for him. It triggered Hahnemann's thinking that a substance that creates certain symptoms in a healthy person may also cure those same symptoms in a sick person. And for the next several years, Hahnemann used natural substances and the traditional medicines of the day in their gross forms, because by that at that point he had not discovered the law of the minimum dose, to do experiments on himself and volunteers and began methodically tracking what happened. This led to his two biggest discoveries, the law of similar and the of similars and the law of the minimum dose. So the law of similars is the concept that every disease is cured by substances that cause the same symptoms of that disease when taken by a healthy person. And the law of the minimum dose says that a substance that causes symptoms in its gross form will be able to initiate the same healing process for those same symptoms in a smaller, non toxic dose. And that's a topic for another day. There's a specific way that they go about doing this. It's an actual process that they discovered that causes a medicine to become potentized, so to speak. You can't just dilute something and expect it to work the same way. There's actually a procedure that Dr. Hahnemann discovered you have to go through to make it a potent substance. But he did this because he wanted to test, more toxic substances and see if he could cure other things, but he didn't want to kill his healthy subjects. And so he started experimenting with how diluted something had to be before it would actually, stop working. And this is a fascinating subject as well that if you were to take one of my study groups, I go into that more. But the birth and near death of homeopathy. So Hahnemann started practicing medicine again, knowing that he could now cure people safely because he had discovered these things. And for the next 30 years, he continued to research, record, and discover. And some say he is the father of the modern double-blind study because he did all of this very methodically and very scientifically. He wrote everything down. He had his subjects write down exactly what they were experiencing. He gave them detailed instructions about how to do so, and he did this hundreds and hundreds of times, possibly thousands of times. Homeopathy took off as a method of treatment, and for many years it rivaled allopathic approaches, which is why it became such a target of criticism. Because even back then, the medicines that they were using allopathically were being sold, and they by that time the patent process had come about, and you can only still today you can only patent something if it is something that you actually created yourself. And that's why allopathic drugs are synthetic, because they have to be in order to get a patent. And once you have a patent on something and you're the only one that can sell it, you're the only one that can dictate how much you sell it for. And so big pharma has actually grown out of this practice of discovering synthetic drugs that mimic what natural substances do, but are actually synthetic. And they, of course, have side effects, and they have negative things, you know, substances in them that are actually toxic to your body. And but they have to in order to have a patent, and that's why you can't patent most homeopathic medicines, because they come from nature and you didn't, create it yourself. So it's not a real big money making venture, this homeopathic medicine thing. And so people are not able to make money off of the medicines. And so the people that are only interested in making money off the medicines are not really interested in homeopathy. And they also have way more money than the people that love this way in this approach. And so they do all that they can to abolish the knowledge about it. So that's exactly what happened. In 1862, in the US, homeopathic doctors controlled 110 hospitals, 30 nursing homes, 62 orphan and retirement homes, and 16 insane asylums. Over half of medical colleges were actually homeopathic. The royal family even uses it to this day. I know the Queen just passed away just a few weeks ago, and she was 96. And honestly, I think she was actually in pretty good health. I don't know. I haven't read enough about it to know how she died. I think she just died of old age, but I know she was at a ceremony fairly recently. I think it was like a month ago, walking around and talking to people, and she said she didn't feel well, but she was still able to do everything. She had her full faculties and all of that. So they actually Prince Charles, actually, I guess King Charles now, he actually gave an interview in 2014 about homeopathy, and he said, he felt like the reason they've lived so long um, and been so healthy is because of homeopathy, and he gets a lot of criticism for that. But the royal family has used homeopathic methods for over 100 years. But unfortunately, in the late 1800s, around the time that pharmaceutical drugs were really taking off, there was a huge clash between the homeopathic view and the allopathic view. Homeopathic medicines can't be patented, like I said before, because they come from nature. But these medicines are effective, and they pose a huge threat to the synthetic drug industry. And as a result, in the US, there was a concerted effort to push homeopathy out of the picture. And by the 1940s, homeopathy was waning in the US. They actually did like a full on marketing campaign against homeopathy. And then after that, they systematically got rid of it in the medical colleges and universities because they were able to get big pharma people on the boards of directors of the universities, and they just systematically got rid of any mention of homeopathy in those places, which I think is just, well, it's evil for one thing, but what it also has done is it's created an environment where medical professionals today don't actually get any information that come from the other perspective, and because of that, they don't even know. So, your doctor is more than likely a great person that wants to help you, but they think that allopathic medicine is the only way to do that. I don't believe that most doctors are in bed with the pharmaceutical companies, but they just really don't know, and they have been brainwashed in their communities to believe that all of this stuff is, hogwash, and they won't even look into it. They won't even examine it. But I personally know a few people who actually are medical doctors that got wind of this and became curious enough to do their own research. And in fact, the study groups that I lead, a lot of the people that are in these study groups are nurses, because they actually see a lot of the effects of the drugs that doctors aren't around to see because doctors are so busy, they move from patient to patient. But nurses are actually caring long term for patients, and they see the side effects crop up. And so I have a lot of nurses that come to, not just me, but there's other people that lead study groups. A lot of nurses, and actually, I'm in a study group because I also attend study groups myself and keep, learning all the time. I'm in a study group that has a medical doctor in the study group, and she has completely stopped using allopathic medicines unless they are absolutely necessary to save a life in case of like an emergency. She only prescribes homeopathic medicines, and she said she's been doing that now for 5 years, I think. And she said her results just absolutely transformed as a result. So, who uses homeopathy today? Well, homeopathy is alive and well in Europe, South America, and India. Entire hospitals use homeopathy in these places. In India, a group of medical doctors in Calcutta have been documenting their use of homeopathic medicines in that city for almost 60 years. And they have a clinic and research center, and they have proven through their studies and the treatment of their patients. And between 12 doctors, they see 1,200 patients per day. They have proven that homeopathic medicines can cure pretty much any disease on the planet. And they have all these computers that have compiled all the information. And the doctors Banerjee, sadly, both of them have passed away in the last couple of years. They've spoken at medical conferences all over the world, sharing their research and results, which are remarkable. So they have done amazing work. And because of their research, even families now can use homeopathic medicines effectively with just a few hours of study when it comes to acute issues and even some chronic issues. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but they have protocols that they have developed. It's kind of like a recipe for what you can use if you have a certain thing that is going on with you. And they just have these protocols that they've written out, and just a normal person can use these protocols. You can buy these medicines on Amazon or, from any homeopathic pharmacy. They're over the counter. They're regulated by the FDA, so they're very consistent in their results. And you don't have to worry about side effects. They don't interact with anything. Obviously, they wouldn't let people just order them on Amazon if they did. So it's a fantastic approach. Why should you use homeopathy? I'll tell you why. Your mission in life is too important to be sick or depressed. And this approach can be used right alongside any other allopathic treatments you may not want to or be able to give up, but can still be effective in helping you feel better. Even if you've ever used antibiotics or analgesics like Tylenol or ibuprofen, or you've ever had surgery, you actually could be experiencing long-lasting effects that are still happening in your body that you don't even know were caused by past usage of antibiotics and other drugs. This impacts your ability to function to your full potential. You need to uproot that stuff so that you can live out the life that God has given you, that God has intended you to live. If you have food intolerances, this is not a normal part of your body's functioning. And it can be partially or fully healed with homeopathy. I've seen it happen myself. It's absolutely amazing. You might have chronic issues like eczema that absolutely are debilitating. They're debilitating mentally, they're debilitating physically. You don't get good sleep, whatever. I have seen eczema be almost 100% cleared up in people that I have spoken with and consulted with. And I have seen people that other homeopaths have consulted with who have had 100% clearing up of the issue. This type of medicine uproots problems that are deep seated in people's bodies. It doesn't happen overnight, it takes time, it takes knowledge. You can't necessarily do it tomorrow, but it can happen if you're patient and you're willing to learn or willing to listen and take the advice of a homeopath. So there's 4 ways you can learn more. If you're interested in these concepts but are still not sure, you can subscribe to my weekly email, which is free. If you're interested and want to study these concepts to start using them in your own family, you can join one of my online study groups for a small fee. If you're convinced you want to use homeopathy, but you are super busy, like most people are, you can set up a consultation with me for yourself and or your family. And this is fee-based, but it's just an individual or family basis. It's not a huge amount of money. And we can set you on the road to figuring out what it is that might uproot the things that are happening in your body. And again, I am not a doctor, so not going to prescribe you anything. You go out there, you buy the stuff yourself, you know, you do it yourself, and it comes from the protocols handed down by the medical doctors in India that have been doing their research for the last almost 60 years. Or you can do all 3. All you have to do is visit nimblehomeopathy.com, and you will find all the options there on my website, along with blog articles and videos about homeopathy. And I cannot wait to see you later, either on my website or in the study group, or even through a consultation if you are needing some, discussion about your particular issues. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for listening.
Oh my gosh, I hope that you absolutely loved the information that you just heard in the presentation that I gave about homeopathy. I know there was a lot of history, there was a lot of, information in there, and you don't need to remember everything, but I hope you got an overall view of what homeopathy is and how it can help you and your family. If you did, and you're as excited as I was when I first learned about this topic, all you have to do to get started learning more is go to nimblehomeopathy.com. That's nimble, Nimble, and then homeopathy, homeopathy.com. nimblehomeopathy.com is my website. I have blog articles, I have videos. You can even watch some more videos about the history of homeopathy if you're interested. You can see things about specific remedies and medicines that might help really common things that people are dealing with. And you can also sign up for my emails or sign up for a homeopathic consultation or even a study group if you've got the time to learn more and you really want to help your family heal by learning this information yourself, because anyone that has an interest, a desire, and the time to do it can learn this topic and help their own families. So I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you, and I hope to be able to communicate with you in the future. Please, if you have any questions, you can also get in contact with me through the nimblehomeopathy.com site, and I would be glad to help you further. So I am just so glad that we got to spend this time together. Have an amazing rest of the weekend. Adios.